Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Re-Federalist Report. I am Brady, also known in some strange corners of the internet as the War Hamster, and joining me today is my good friend, constitutional mentor, Mr. Constitution himself, Douglas V. Gibbs.
Thanks for having me, and for those of you who normally watch this channel, it's been a while.
Doug's been traveling.
Yeah, I'm traveling. That's the reason why the light's so bad.
And today he's joining us from Canton, Ohio, home of the NFL Football Hall of Fame.
Matter of fact, we're going to be going there tomorrow.
Very good. I finally can go to Cooperstown for Baseball Hall of Fame because it looks like they're going to put Pete Rose in finally.
Yeah, I thought of you too when I saw that. Well, basically the attitude was he's dead now. They can't do any damage once he's dead. Why not?
Yeah, it's a shame he never got to live to see it. But my childhood idol, for those who don't know, I love Pete Rose, Charlie Hustle.
Yeah, no, he was a scrapper, and those are the type of players I like. And I was actually also a big fan of Pete Rose as well, although I had other childhood idols. He wasn't my favorite, but he was definitely among the top 5.
Well, today we are going to start. It's going to be episode 1 of a very long series because we are going to go through James Madison's notes from the Philadelphia Constitutional Convention. Kind of shaped the country a little bit. And, it's really, I think it's important that we go through the notes because it's the only written record of what they talked about, what they cared about. But you got to get into the heads of the people that were there to know what their original intent actually was. And that's how we try to go through the Constitution or apply anything today is about original intent. And one of the things I talked about last week is that Ron asked me about the difference between an originalist and a textualist. And he was talking about Clarence Thomas. And I think it really does come down to intent. You got to know why they wrote what they wrote, not just what they wrote.
Context. And the fact that politicalpistachio.com, douglasvgibbs.com, whichever, I just, one of my most recent articles about context, and context is huge because without context, you really don't understand. Textualists, while they are going by what it says, and that's fine. Language changes, the emphasis on certain ideas or definitions change over time, and so kind of to steal from my article a little bit, when you're not taking into account full context, you don't know the whole picture. If you understand the context, then you understand fully what was, or at least you try to fully what was meant. Because our society, everything that we do, is shaped by history. We may not realize how important history is, and so when we are, doing our investigative research and we're looking into things, history is our guide, so to speak. And if you don't have the proper context, if you really don't understand why and how it fits in the broader structure, where they were intending us to be led to and where they were hoping we would go, then you get into trouble. When we grasp the context, then we're no longer blindly reacting to the language, to the world, to our situation. And we began to engage in a more meaningful and powerful way. So in other words, when you understand the context, you stop being reactive and you become responsive.
Yeah, I think one of the major things that I want listeners to try to keep an eye on if you follow this whole series is not necessarily what they were trying to accomplish, but what they were trying to avoid. What were they afraid of?
Absolutely.
This government that they were creating, they knew, they just fought a bloody revolution against the most powerful government in history in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can say England's more powerful than Rome was, but you can make the argument.
At the time it was, and I was talking to my wife about this. They had just replaced Spain as the major power. Spain tried to conquer to go into power. England did something that Spain didn't do. They used an economic means and renewable, what's the right word? Renewable investment, where you have, the cash crop of tobacco and things like that. So the British built their empire on something that was more than just the house of cards that Spain had. And so We have to remember that the founding fathers were Englishmen. They grew up with these ideas. They grew up as a part of this wonderful idea that the British were, at least when it came to the economic part of it and the free market and all of that. But at the same time, the tyranny that got laced into it, this is what they were trying to avoid. They had watched Spain, they had watched Britain, they had watched Rome and Greece and the Saxons, and they took all those lessons. And it goes back to the context of history, and they were trying to piece together something that would stand the test of time.
Yeah, and to really hammer that point home, a lot of people think the revolution was fought over taxation. Well, that's kind of a yes and no. The average American at the time was paying about 5% of taxes of the average Englishman. It wasn't just about taxes; it was about self-determination and governing yourselves. That's what really, really mattered. And these are incredibly important principles that we've somehow lost throughout the years. So we did a series of shows not long ago about the Articles of Incorporation. Articles of Confederation.
Right.
Was the governing document that the colonies put together during the Revolutionary War. High-level picture of that, it was basically they had one branch of government. It was legislative. They did not have an executive, and they did not have a judicial branch that was overseeing national laws, because they didn't think there'd be national laws. States could handle almost everything of their own. They also had a monocameral, unicameral, that's the word, single legislative.
One chamber.
Yeah.
A single chamber legislature.
And the other real big high level thing from it is it was one vote per state.
Right.
Yeah. So and that became a problematic because a little state.
Let me stop you there just for a second. Even at that time, they feared democracy. When you have pure democracy the cities control things, and they feared that. And that's part of the reason why they did that. They didn't want the states with the larger populations to tyrannically control things. And like large cities, the states at the time that had the larger populations didn't understand all of the idiosyncrasies that the smaller states had to go through, what it was like to be in their shoes. And when you have a larger state basically controlling things based on their way of looking at things and their interests, it really leaves the more rural areas out to dry. The way I like to put it in today's more modern text is that, when the cities or the more heavily populated areas control things through democracy, what you wind up with is things like people from the city dictating to farmers on how to farm. And so they were looking at trying to make sure that the larger populations and the smaller populations kind of had an even voice there, and, so that there would be balance. Balance was the key. However, like with anything, if you have too much of something, if you're not in moderation, you have an extreme, you have problems. So while the idea of avoiding democracy was good, it was so extreme that they began to run into problems.
Yep, and that's the simple way of saying it is that they decided they needed to protect the small states from the large states and the large states from the small states. And we'll get into that. I was
telling my wife yesterday, the militias. Why did they have militias? To protect each other from each other originally.
And we'll get into that more as we go into Madison's notes, because they debate this stuff on the floor.
Right.
The last real important characteristic about the Articles of Confederation is the fact that it took unanimous. All 13 colonies had to agree to amend to the Articles of Confederation.
Which would have been fine if Rhode Island wasn't part of the group.
Remember that. Rhode Island, it was always a bit of a problem. And well, we'll get there. But let's talk about the events that led up to all of a sudden, they realized that these Articles of Confederation aren't working. The government isn't strong enough. It cannot maintain order. Doug, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about the stories that led us to Shays' rebellion.
Well, so let me start kind of in the middle of the story, and then I'll work and then go back to the beginning. So during the Annapolis Convention in August of 1786, delegates from a number of the states, not all of them, get together, talking about the problems that they were having with the Articles of Confederation. Everybody knew it was a problem. Everybody knew they needed a stronger government. So during that convention, guy named Alexander Hamilton, which normally I'm not a fan of. And of course, he's the one that recommended we need a bigger, stronger government, but he was right. Now, the question was how much bigger, how much stronger? Because the Articles of Confederation, understand, they were written during wartime. In fact, even though they weren't ratified, the Articles of Confederation wasn't ratified until 1781. They began writing it the moment the Declaration of Independence was in play, because they knew they needed some type of government system. For number one, because a country needs it, and number two, because France basically told them, hey, we want to make sure you guys are serious about this. The Declaration of Independence is one thing, but are you going to unite under a single government? We're not going to help you until we know you're serious about this. And so I don't want to say it was hastily put together. I don't know if that's the right word, but in a sense it was. And also, you got to remember, these colonies developed independently, individually. They wanted to keep their own autonomy as much as possible, and they feared big government. So they went, and once again, I go back to balances and extremes, but they went to an extreme away from big government for fear of it. And so now we have the war is over, and the veterans, the troops that fought the war, that made America America, they were promised that they'd be paid if they enlisted. As the militias wasn't working out. Every time it got really rough, the militias were running for the hills. But when they offered an enlistment and better training and more cohesion in the military, and they promised these guys, a paycheck and some land afterwards, for the most part, not all of it, but most of it in the new Northwest Territory, guys were enlisting. They were willing to stick it out. They were willing to stand there and die if they had to. It became a different military. It became and so it was necessary. So now the war is over. These guys, okay, where's my land? Where's my money? They're coming back to their farms. Their farms are dying. They haven't been taken care of them. Plus, in some cases, with the British and other issues that destroy the farm or something like that. So they're coming back to their farms, and they're losing money. They're broke. They need this pay really bad. So the government, under the Articles of Confederation, begins issuing these notes that are basically worthless, and they're basically IOUs, is what they are. And the Continentals are no longer really out there available. They're not using the British money, and the creditors are not taking this stuff. This is worthless paper to them. Give me gold, give me silver, give me Continentals, and it'll take care of your debt. That stuff we're not taking. And so on, and it became something more. But what wound up happening is these veterans began to, rebel. They were ticked off. They couldn't. They're going broke. They fought for this country, and the money they were given was worthless to them. And so one of the things that was happening is the creditors were taking them to court. So how do you stop someone from taking them to court? You block the steps, the front steps of the courthouse, and they began to do things like that. And then this was an armed rebellion. There were shots fired. There were people injured and killed, and the central government couldn't do anything about it. Number one, the militias or the troops, that's who was rebelling. They couldn't tax to create a new force. They didn't have the taxation power, and the states created the forces being put together. So what do? It was too weak of a government. What wound up happening is they hired mercenaries basically out of Boston. The corporations did, not the government. And think about it. These are giving the troops kind of a flashback to what was going on during the Revolution. Suddenly, remembering the Hessians and other mercenaries coming in, and we've got a problem. So and we got a full-on rebellion. It's called Shays Rebellion. Shays, I can't remember his first name off the top of my head, but Shays reluctantly was one of the leaders, and so it kind of got named after him. And so now the founders are looking at this and going, we got a problem here. We're going to descend into anarchy and chaos if we don't get a handle on this. We need a stronger government that's able to tax, that's able to put together a military force, that's able to bring the states together in a firmer union. Because right now, they're in a confederation where the states hold all the power, and the only really linkage they have is the membership. The central government has so few powers that it can't really effectively get anything done. But
Yeah,
then but they also knew we just fought a war against big government, so they had to do so carefully. They had to create something that found balance. They were hoping to fix the Articles of Confederation. They set the date for May of 1787, and but most of them knew they weren't fixing articles. They were
well, yeah.
Constitution.
They couldn't admit that. If they told everyone they were going to Philadelphia to replace the Articles of Confederation, you would have had an even bigger mutiny on your hands.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And well, in fact, once it took about 6 weeks before they came to a conclusion during the convention. We're writing a new constitution, and a lot of the delegates walked out.
Yeah, and that they came to that. We'll get to this in more detail, but high level, they came to that conclusion because they realized the amendments they were writing were bigger than the Articles of Confederation themselves. They may as well write a new one. There's one other real big element, and this will be reflected in some of the things we see in the Constitution, was the states were like, for example, New Jersey was putting tariffs on New York, livestock or what have you. And it was just basically almost shutting down. It became a trade war, almost shut down interstate trade.
Yeah, well, it came back to that firmer union. The states needed to be held together, and there needed to be a full faith and credit. We're a country now, guys. You're not separate countries anymore. We are one country with states. So there's certain things you guys are going to have to agree on and stop doing that countries do. And that was a large part of it. Commerce Clause was a huge part of it, but the Commerce Clause, and we'll get to it later, was not about dictating. It was about regulating. In other words, smoothing things out.
Very good. So some of the state leaders of Virginia are the ones who call for the convention. They decided to do this in Philadelphia. And 55 men decide to meet. They didn't all get there at the same time. I took the liberty to get put together a readable version of that.
Okay, and while you're clicking that, let me say this about James Madison. James Madison knew that they were going to write a new constitution, and he was excited about this. He was so excited that immediately after the Annapolis Convention, he began working on his plan, which became known as the Virginia Plan. We'll get to that more detail later. But he spent 9 months working on this Virginia Plan. This is the reason why he's known as the father of the Constitution. Most of the framework of the Constitution is in the Virginia Plan. There were some things that were not acceptable. They hammered it out. We'll get to that. So he actually gets to Philadelphia early with his Virginia Plan. His fellow Virginia delegates aren't even there yet. So he starts sharing it with the Pennsylvania delegates since they're already there. And then he also takes it to his Virginia delegate, says, hey, I don't want to present this as being something from me. I want it to be presented as something from us. So he gives it to the Virginia delegation. They present it as the Virginia Plan from Virginia. It's funny because the reason why I bring that up is it shows the difference of the different gentlemen that were there. You have 3 plans that were brought forth. You had the Virginia Plan as a group. Then you had the
New Jersey
Plan as a group. Then you have the Hamilton Plan. What a narcissistic son. I just think that's hilarious. Oh, and this one's mine. But granted, John Lansing and Robert Yates were not real happy when his fellow New Yorkers that were there. And so after about 5 or 6 weeks, they're like, we're out of here. You guys are writing a new constitution. And that wound up leaving. No, there you go. John Lansing and Robert Yates. How about that? Remember the names properly. That left Alexander Hamilton by himself to represent New York.
Yeah, so we'll be referencing this list quite often. It's kind of helpful to remember where everyone's from as we go through Madison's notes.
It's also helpful to realize that a lot of these guys came and went. Not all of them were there the whole time. Some of them left and never came back. Some of them came late. So just keep that in mind as well.
So 55 gentlemen, 11 of them named William, 2 William Houstons, one from New Jersey, and the other William Houston was from Georgia, spells it a little differently. You see this Houston spelled both ways, but these were the 55 delegates. One thing missing here is there's only 12 colonies, Doug. What's missing? Oh, well, there's no Rhode Island.
Yeah, good old Rhode Island. I mentioned Rhode Island earlier about kind of being the the troubling child, the one that kind of was different often. And Rhode Island, that came with Rhode Island's nature. 60-second lesson on Rhode Island. So William Rogers, the founder of Rhode Island, didn't like what the Puritans were doing in Massachusetts, didn't like how they're doing it. And basically because he refused to participate and abide, they basically were going to arrest him and send him back to England. The day he was supposed to be arrested, he escapes. He heads down in Rhode Island. His followers follow him. They start an unauthorized colony. Later on, then they appeal to England to be a colony. They become a colony. So it began kind of with a rogue nature. But it was no religion. No, this is freedom of religion on steroids, and it's a wonderful thing. But Rhode Island had a different way of thinking about things, a different way of doing things, and they feared big government. They feared everything that was controlling. That's the reason why he ran from the Puritans. So it was in their nature. So when it came down to the convention, they actually did send delegates, but they didn't get there because word got to them that looked like they were going to probably write a new constitution. They turned around and went right back. So while Rhode Island did say they were sending delegates, and they did actually depart, they never got there. They went back. And so Rhode Island is not there. And so understand, when this was written and this was accepted, and the 12 states, of course, North Carolina took their sweet time too, ratified it, Rhode Island wasn't a part of the country. They were the outsiders. Understand this, until they ratified this Constitution. They didn't want to participate in writing it, and they didn't want to ratify it, and European countries are licking their chops. This is their way to sneak in.
There's an argument. There's an argument to be made that the Constitution of the United States is illegitimate because it needed the Articles of Confederation were the ruling document. It required all 13 colonies to sign on to change it. And they're meeting in Philadelphia with only 12 of them. So anything they wrote was not legitimate.
That argument goes out the window the moment Rhode Island ratified it.
Yep. Agreed. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Bear with me. All right, now I have it. We are going to go to our good friend, the Avalon Project.
And I introduced him to this, and I told him, be careful. It's addicting. So all of you, feel free. This is an awesome site, but it's addicting. Be careful. You may be there for days.
Months.
So this does come from the Avalon Project. I was actually telling a lot of people about it when I was at Mount Vernon, and I was at Mount Vernon recently, and Montpelier, Madison's house, and Monticello, and Monroe's, and John Tyler's house. And so I shared the joys of Avalon Project with a lot of them. Go ahead.
Very good. So there's all kinds of historical documents in here, but this is Madison's notes, and we're going to go by date. So we've got the week, and you notice this thing took 18 weeks, went from May through September. And we're just going to go through each individual day and do some highlights of the debate. Some of it's a little bit dry and boring, so we'll summarize more. But right when they get there, the first thing they're going to do is they're trying to figure out the organization. How is this convention going to be held?
Right.
So we're on May 14th, 1787 through May 25th. This is Madison writing all this. Quite often he's doing very little debating because he's doing so much writing. Now they're about to put rules in place that nobody besides Madison can take any notes, and he certainly can't take it outside the convention hall.
Now that said, there were a lot of others that were taking notes, but they didn't take as copious notes. Robert Yates took good notes, but he took off after 6 weeks. Lyons took pretty decent notes. Of course, you've got Charles Thompson, who was the secretary. Or I'm sorry, not Charles Thompson. That was the secretary for the Declaration of Independence. But anyway, the secretary also could take notes. But Madison took the most copious notes, the best notes, the most complete notes. But what's funny about it, let me say this real quick, is that after he was done taking his copious notes, he didn't believe they were copious enough. So his original notes did get a little bit of an upgrade after he looked at, Yates' notes and the secretary's notes, a few others, and then he kind of filled in stuff that he might have missed out on.
Okay. We've got about 25 of the members here right now, including both Charles Coachworth Pinckney and Charles Pinckney. Difference between the two. And I'll have the reference for what states these guys are from, and I'll try to call them out as we go.
One of them is South Carolina, I believe.
Both of the Pinckneys are South Carolina.
All right, both of them are? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So this is Mr. Robert Morris from Pennsylvania, one of the wealthiest of the founding fathers. In fact, he's given credit for financing of a lot of George Washington's efforts. And he was very much out of vested interest because he thought he was lending the government money and kind of wanted to get paid back. So he basically opens up and he proposes that George Washington be the president of the convention, and Mr. Rutledge seconds the motion, expressing his confidence that the choice would be unanimous, and observing the presence of General Washington forbade any observations on the occasion which might otherwise be proper. General Washington was accordingly unanimously elected by the ballot and conducted to the chair by Mr. Robert Morris and Mr. Rutledge, from which in a very emphatic manner he thanked the convention for the honor they had conferred on him, reminded them of the novelty of the scene of business in which he was to act, lamented his want of better qualifications, and claimed the indulgence of the House towards the involuntary errors which his inexperience might occasion.
Let's stop right there for a second. An interesting thing about George Washington is, and I tell people this, he was an imposing individual. He was tall, he was handsome, he was a man's man, he was very charismatic. And we put him on a huge pedestal, and for some things maybe we ought to, but we have to be reminded also that he was probably among the least educated of the founding fathers.
Absolutely.
And most of it was just, most of what he knew was from reading. He couldn't speak the different languages like a lot of the others could. But he wasn't fluent in French. He definitely wasn't fluent in Latin and Greek like most of the other founding fathers. But he had other characteristics that was very respectable. And one of them was he was an honest man. Okay, now the idea that he couldn't tell a lie, that's actually false. But he was an honest man and he was respected. But the main thing is, and I hate to say it this way, but he didn't put up with anybody's crap. And that's why he was the perfect president. What's interesting is, going into this, everybody knew he was going to be president of the convention. And when they were going through the convention, everybody knew that that was just a foreshadowing of what he would eventually be, the president of the United States, first president under the Constitution. They all saw that coming. Anyway, so it is interesting. And also take note that the chair he was sitting in was the same chair that John Hancock sat on when they were debating the Declaration of Independence, in that very same room.
Very good. Continuing, Mr. Wilson moves that a secretary be appointed and nominated it says Temple Franklin, that's Benjamin Franklin is what it should say. Alexander Hamilton then nominates Major Jackson. They take a ballot. Major Jackson gets 5 votes, Mr. Franklin 2. On reading the credentials of the deputies, it was noticed that those from Delaware were prohibited from changing the article.
Go back to the part about Franklin. What were your Mr. Temple Franklin? I see it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now you'll notice earlier it's DOCR, that's doctor. So Benjamin Franklin didn't have an actual doctorate. He had 2 honorary doctorates, and he took them seriously. He loved being called Dr. Franklin. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, and of course we skipped over the part. The nomination came with particular grace from Pena, as Dr. Franklin alone could have been thought of as a competitor. The doctor was himself to have made the nomination of General Washington, but the state of the weather and of his health confined him to his house. He's in his 80s by now, people. Benjamin Franklin, who's in the 70s during the Revolutionary War. So he is not in good health. Okay.
As for Temple Franklin, that actually was another Franklin. It was not Benjamin. William Temple Franklin was young there. He was only in his 20s or something like that. But okay. There was a William Temple Franklin there.
So the list that I showed earlier.
If I remember, he was related to Benjamin Franklin or something like that.
Benjamin Franklin might have had a number of illegitimate kids too. But that's a different story. The 55 names we let, I guess there were some people there that aren't on it. Maybe that 55 is a list of the signers when this thing was completed. I'll have to double check that, get a better list. On the ballot, Major Jackson.
I did a little bit, just real quick. Mr. Temple Franklin, Benjamin Franklin's grandson, was nominated to be Secretary of the Constitutional Convention, but he was not selected. James Wilson, a delegate from Pennsylvania, nominated him for the position. However, the position ultimately went to William Jackson, who received 5 votes, while Temple Franklin received 2. So there you go.
All right. On reading the credentials of the deputies, it was noticed that those from Delaware were prohibited from changing the article in the Confederation establishing an equality of votes among the states. So apparently they had something in their state constitution that prevented them from taking certain votes. The appointment of a committee.
Well, and real quick, what it was saying is in their state constitution, they couldn't, their votes, they could not change articles in the Confederation without an equality of vote number from the states. In other words, we have a room full of people from different states, and all the states don't have equal representation. Now, how they wound up resolving this is that Delaware ultimately was okay with it, was that while there were a number of delegates from each of the states, each state only had 1 vote. Therefore, Delaware was able to participate more once they made that determination.
Very good. So they have the appointment of a committee consisting of Messrs. Wythe, Hamilton, and Pinckney, and the motion of Mr. C. Pinckney to prepare standing rules and orders was the only remaining step taken on this day. Pretty much you're going to get Robert's rules for
yeah, their version of it.
Yeah, there was one of these notes I wanted to. Okay. So that's the first part, basically just figuring out how we're going to convene.
And understand, once again, on May 14th, only a smattering of the delegates that would be there had arrived yet. All the states weren't represented. They had already determined they couldn't do any order of business per se. They were just basically setting up the foundation of how they were going to run this thing. That was it. And once again, everybody wasn't there yet.
So we get to May 25th. Following members appeared, to wit, lists a whole bunch more. We're not going to go through.
Go back up a little bit. Good. Okay, so yeah, matter of fact, they just they just basically wrote what I just said. So Monday, yeah. May 14th, 1787 was the day fixed for the meeting of the deputies of convention for revising the federal system of government. On that day, a small number only had assembled. 7 states were not convened till Friday, 25th of May. So what it's basically saying is this second meeting really is the first meeting because they didn't have enough bodies. The first one, they were just talking about what they want to do, but they really couldn't do anything until now because 7 states had not convened yet. Now, on May 25th, that's what that first sentence or first 2 sentences is about. Now we have enough delegates from enough states there that we can do our business.
Very good. And I'm not going to read through all the names. All right, Mr. Robert Morris, Pennsylvania, then informs the members assembled that by instruction and in behalf of the deputation of Pena, he proposed George Washington, the late commander-in-chief, for president of the convention. Mr. Rutledge seconded the motion. Okay, we already went through this. I guess it's repetitive. Well,
what it was is they had done it before, but because there wasn't enough states there, it didn't get approved, and so they had to go through it again.
Very good. Okay, so we get to May 28th. Mr. Wythe, is it Withy? I think that's correct. Withy.
That's Wythe.
Did you say Wythe? Okay. I've never actually knew that answer.
Is it Wythe or Wythe? What's Wythe, actually? Wythe, I'm sorry. Well, the reason why I know is because we were just at his house the other day. Right. Wythe, that's right. It's Wythe. Now that I remember.
Well, Mr. Wythe from the committee for preparing rules made a report which employed the deliberations of this day. Mr. King objected to one of the rules in the report authorizing any member to call for the yeas and nays and have them entered on the minutes. He urged that as acts of the convention were not to bind the constituents, it was unnecessary to exhibit this evidence of the votes, and improper as changes of opinion would be frequent in the course of the business and would fill the minutes with contradictions.
Now, let me stop you there for a second. here's why it's so important we're going through these notes. You're not just going to hear what they agreed on. You're going to hear what they didn't agree on. You're going to hear the yays and the nays. You're going to hear the contested dissent that was from some members. And that gives you the full context. That's why this is important. So understand, you're going to see a lot of objections. You're going to see a lot of debate. It's going to go back and forth. You're going to see things go, well, what? That's not the Constitution. Of course it's not. But that was the dissent. So just be aware that that's sometimes what we're going to be going through here. And it's important so that we understand the mindset here too. Not everybody, it's funny because we put these founding fathers sometimes maybe on too high of a pedestal, and that they were somehow just dancing through the daisies, hand in hand, arm around each other, all excited. And that's not what it was. I mean, we talk about how much disagreement and division there is in today's politics. That ain't nothing.
These guys fought like cats and dogs, but they did it as gentlemen. They were gentlemanly about it for the most part.
Except for the ones that are holding canes. Oh, no. Maybe that didn't get too bad yet. But in the 1800s, trust me, those canes started swinging. But anyway, go ahead.
We had no duels. All right, so this is about whether we're recording votes. And I think the important point here is they recognize the fact that they're going to change their mind during the debates. Mm-hmm. They went there with an open mind. They have the right to change their mind. And that's why Colonel Mason seconds the objection, adding that such a record of the opinions of members would be an obstacle to a change of them on conviction. And in case of it being hereafter promulged, nice word, must furnish handles to the adversaries of the result of the meeting. The proposed rule was rejected. The standing rules agreed to were as follows. Let's go ahead and just click on these. Previous to the arrival of the majority of the states, the rule by which they ought to vote in the convention had been made a subject of conversation among the members present. It was pressed by Governor Morris and others from Pennsylvania that the large states should unite in firmly refusing to the small states an equal vote, as unreasonable and as enabling the small states to negotiate to negative every good system of government.
They're afraid, in other words, that because the states had equal vote, the smaller states, which slightly outnumbered the more populated states, then would not agree to anything. It would be Rhode Island all over again. That was the fear.
Let's take a look at that in more detail because this is such an important point. So I brought this graphic up. There it is. All right. Up top are the 7 smaller states, totaling 1 million. Down here are the 6 bigger states, totaling 2.6 million. If it's 1 representative per state, the small states we get 7 votes, the big states we get 6.
And not only that, but also Maryland kind of borders between the two and often would side with the smaller states. So really, you even have a larger difference than that. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, and if you do it by population, 1 representative for 30,000 people, important number, that'll come up later, it would be 84 votes to 30. So you can see how important this point is. Mm-hmm. The other thing to note is Virginia, with 747,000 population, was far and away the biggest state. So we'll pull this back. We'll pull up this again because it does matter.
Now, what's funny is we look at these numbers and that 747,000 making Virginia the most populated state, and that's not even a good-sized city nowadays.
Well, yeah, and that's a really important point because one of the things the founding fathers understood is that a republic, for it to work, needed to be small. The bigger it gets, the harder it becomes to govern, and they would discuss that. How many representatives per population that became.
And understand that this is a guess on their part. This is what they believe based on their analysis. They really didn't have a whole lot of really good examples. They had examples, but nothing like what they were forming, because they were forming something that, while there had been republics, there had never been a republic like this. So really, they're guessing. Larger republic probably wouldn't work as well. We say that about democracy, don't we? In small situations, democracy or communism might work, but not in large. Well, and now on the latter, communism, we know for a fact it doesn't work. But democracy, looking back in history, in small cases, they work better. Than the moment it gets bigger, then you start seeing the corruption and the bigger cities starting taking control. So they believe the same thing about a republic. A republic can be maintained as a large population, but it has to be, but you have to stick to those principles. What happens is democracy starts squeaking in, and that's what happens when you get a larger population. And I think that's what they understood. They feared that democracy would begin to seep in and destroy the republic.
Yeah, and this note here by Madison is talking about how the big states they conspired together. And it says right here, we're going to unite to firmly refusing the small states an equal vote. It says, which much in the nature of things be founded on a violation of that equality. The members from Virginia, conceiving that such an attempt might beget fatal altercations between the large and small states, and that it would be easier to prevail on the latter, in the course of deliberations, to give up their equality for the sake of an effective government than on taking the field of discussion to disarm themselves of the right and thereby throw themselves on the mercy of the large states, discountenanced and stifled the project.
I'd like to take a moment to mention that James Madison is one of the most interesting characters at this point, because during the convention, you watch an evolution. Madison went in firmly standing on the fact that he believed to be fact, that the larger states must be in control. The smaller states would screw it up, and that's just the way it is, because we're more wise, whatever. As the convention progressed, and as he also communicated with Jefferson, who was in France, granted, it was taking a month or two for the letters to get, so his responses were showing up about halfway through the convention, but nonetheless, you watch Madison begin to understand the importance of making sure that the less populated states also have a voice. And then in Federalist Paper number 10, which comes after the convention, when the Constitution is out there for ratification, he argues that these factions, and which gets mentioned here quite a bit, the best way to control the factions is not to allow one faction to rule, but to set the factions against each other. And then it was his way of saying, now I understand the large states controlling everything's bad, the small states controlling everything is bad. So what you do is you create a system where they equally have power, and then you set them against each other. And that's how you control the factions, so that one can't run away with everything. But you'll watch because remember, Madison's writing these notes. And if you read about him personally and his notes and some of the things he says during this convention, you can see that evolution.
Okay, this last paragraph's a long one, but it's worth going through. This is basically how the convention is going to be conducted. So I'm going to go. Okay. I'm going to try to summarize as much as possible. Colonel Mason seconded an objection, adding that okay, we just did that one. The standing rules agreed to were as follow. A house to do business shall consist of the deputies of not less than 7 states. It's a quorum. And all questions shall be decided by the greater number of these, which shall be fully represented, but a less number than 7 may adjourn from day to day. Immediately after the president shall have taken the chair and the members their seats, the minutes of the preceding meeting day shall be read. Every member rising to speak shall address the president, and whilst he shall be speaking, none shall pass between them or hold discourse with another, or read a book, pamphlet, or paper, or check your cell phone. Tell that to people in Congress. Printed or manuscripted of 2 members rising at the same time, so that the president shall name him who shall first be heard.
Now, notice this is not only Robert's rules, but also this is, you're going to address the president. You're not addressing each other, just like Robert's rules. You address the chair. And so this is very similar to what we use today. Go ahead.
A member shall not speak oftener than twice without special leave upon the same question, and not the second time before every other who had been silent shall have been heard, if he choose to speak upon the subject. A motion made and seconded shall be repeated, and if written, as it shall be when any member shall so require, read aloud by the secretary before it shall be debated, and may be withdrawn at any time before the vote upon it shall have been declared. Continuing, orders of the day shall be read next after the minutes, and either discussed or postponed before any other business shall be introduced. When a debate shall arise upon a question, no motion other than to amend the question, to commit it, or to postpone the debate shall be received. A question which is complicated shall, at the request of any member, be divided and put separately on the propositions of which it is compounded. The determination of a question, although fully debated, shall be postponed if the deputies of any state desire it until the next day. There's a reason for that. A lot of this, what went on, would go, they would meet afterwards at various, taverns and dining halls, and they would get a lot of their business done. And basically, if they disagreed on the floor, they would hack out those disagreements in person. Sometimes you'd send an emissary to someone with a cooler head, what have you. But a lot of the stuff was done not on the floor.
Sometimes you need to get some studs in your system to cool down.
Exactly.
And what's interesting is there's a correlation of that in the Constitution, where the president, if he sees the two houses in disagreement, can adjourn them because of disagreement. And same idea here, exact same thing. That actually goes into the Constitution.
A writing which contains any matter brought on to be considered shall be read once throughout for information, then by paragraphs to be debated, and again with the amendments, if any, made on the second reading. And afterwards the question shall be put on the whole, amended or approved in its original form, as the case shall be. Committees shall be appointed by ballot, and the members who have the greatest number of ballots, although not a majority of the votes present, shall be the committee. When two or more members have an equal number of votes, the member standing first on the list in the order of taking down the ballot shall be preferred. A member may be called to order by any other member as well as by the president, and may be allowed to explain his conduct or expressions supposed to be reprehensible. It means if you get out of line, they can call you out.
Yeah.
And all questions of order shall be decided by the president without appeal or debate. He's got the gavel. He's got the final say.
Hey, that's why you want Washington in that seat. Like I said, this is a guy who doesn't put up with anybody's, you know what. Go ahead.
Upon a question to adjourn for the day, which may be made at any time, if it be seconded, the question shall be put without a debate. When the House shall adjourn, every member shall stand in his place until the president pass him. Nice formality. A letter from the sundry persons of the state of Rhode Island, addressed to the Honorable Chairman of the General Convention, was presented to the chair by Mr. Governor Morris, and being read was ordered to lie on the table for further consideration.
So Rhode Island, when they decided to bring their delegates back, they did send a letter.
Mr. Butler moved the House to provide against interruption of business by absence of members and against licentious publications of their proceedings, to which was added by Mr. Spate a motion to provide that on one hand the House might not be precluded by a vote upon any question from revising the subject matter of it when they see cause, nor on the other hand be led hastily to rescind a decision, which was the result of a mature discussion.
I like how he worded that, which was the result of a mature discussion. There was a lot of immature discussion going on. So much so that at one point, Benjamin Franklin recommends prayer and they need to settle down, but we'll get to that. Go ahead.
Whereupon it was ordered that these motions be referred to the consideration of the committee appointed to draw up the standing rules, and that the committee make report thereon. And then they adjourn till tomorrow at 10 o'clock. So that was May 28th. How are we doing on time here?
We are coming up at the top of the hour. We did start, though, 10 minutes after.
Yeah, let's go about another 10, 15 minutes. Let's go through the next day. Getting into the meat and bones a little bit.
Now, remember, real quick, as he's clicking that back up, first 4 to 5 weeks, really, they really debated heavily. They argued. In other words, it got ugly. And they really didn't get a whole lot done. But we're going to go through all of that. And then it was at the 6th week where it was realized they're going to have to write a new constitution. So understand what the part we're going through right here, they are, for the most part, still of the mindset, we're going to fix the Articles of Confederation. So when you hear some of this language, remember, that's still the mindset. They're not ready to write a new constitution yet. They don't really get there until about the 6th week. Go ahead.
Okay, May 29th. John Dickinson and Elbridge Gerry, sorry.
Gary, it is Gary. John Dickinson, does that name sound familiar?
It does. You want to tell them why?
Well, John Dickinson is an. Well, let me say this: founding father John Dickinson was, let me help us understand this guy. John Dickinson was both. He was from Delaware. He was a Quaker from Delaware. Remember, Delaware was the lower counties of Pennsylvania. Okay, so and he was a member of the First Continental Congress. He signed the Continental Association, the Articles of Association. He helped write up the final draft of the Declaration of the Causes, necessity to take up arms in 1775. He was there during the Declaration of Independence, but he didn't. He held back. He abstained a lot of his votes, and he refused to sign the document. And then he did sign the U.S. Constitution. So if you remember Dickinson from the Declaration of Independence, that's where he comes from. That's where you're going to hear from him. And he was, and it's interesting because during the Declaration of Independence, he was kind of a thorn in the side to the delegation. He did not like what was going on. But man, once it happened, he was all over the Constitution. And that's why I like to bring him up, because once again, just like with Madison, you watch the evolution of these people. We have to be very careful when you hear someone say, well, such and such said such and such at one point. Yeah, but these people were evolving. I know when I was at Monticello, one of the guides talked about how Jefferson was a slave owner and he believed that blacks were inferior, and he wrote it early in his life. Yeah, early in his life. He evolved as an individual. He realized they weren't inferior because they were inferior by color. He realized there was an inferiority because of their condition. They had not been exposed to education. And so, and this was an evolution. Same thing here. Dickinson. This is the reason why I love the fact that Dickinson, he's trying to, he's all over. He participates in this convention. He's an important member of this convention. And this is a guy that was against the Declaration of Independence.
And Elbridge Gerry, of course, is the namesake of the gerrymander.
Right.
Which is long-standing Senate procedure.
Yeah, people like to say gerrymander. It's gerrymander.
Yep. All right, they took their seats. The following rules are added on the report from Mr. Wythe from the committee.
By the way, for those of you, Mr. Wythe's house is in Williamsburg. And we did take a tour of his house. And he's a founding father that a lot of people don't think of or remember, but he was definitely a very important figure.
Okay.
Look him up.
That no member shall be absent from the House so as to interrupt the representation of the state without leave. Other additional rules.
Take this seriously, guys. You're going to be here. You're going to be a part of it. Don't mess around. Don't interrupt it. Take it seriously. That's really what they're saying.
Very good. That committees do not sit whilst the House shall be or ought to be sitting. They're always breaking off into different committees. But when the whole full House is in session, the committee can't meet on its own. Right.
And understand the Constitution is written in committees. Each committee is given a section. We want you to write about this. We want you to work on that. And these committees, then once they put it together, then they present it to the House or the body as a whole, and then they debate it, and then they might go back in a committee to tweak it based on that vote. So just be aware that this wasn't just a bunch of guys sitting in a room talking.
I mean, they didn't have lobbyists.
Notes, and so also understand the committee notes are not in this. Madison's notes are of the floor. So now, but the committee notes aren't here.
So what you're saying is they didn't have a whole team of lobbyists doing all the writing for them?
No.
Okay, here's an important one. An additional rule that no copy be taken of any entry on the journal during the sitting of the House without leave of the House. Basically, Madison is the one who's taking the copy. The members only be permitted to inspect the journal. that nothing spoken in the House be printed or otherwise published or communicated without leave.
Let me,
Secrecy mattered.
let me open this up a little bit here for discussion. So the founding fathers understood. Well, let me preface this real quick. I like to cook, and I know sometimes when I'm putting into what I'm cooking, how I'm putting it together, people be like, "I don't like that." Well, trust me, you'll like it after it's done. Don't watch me cook. Don't watch me make the sausage. Right? Just because they feared that the average person would see this and go, "Oh my God, these guys who hold high position are going to give us a monarchy. What's going on?" They were afraid of that. So they wanted to make sure that they did this in secret. And then they, don't watch us make the sausage. Wait till the sausage is done. Then we'll show you what we got. And so they couldn't talk about it. The doors were closed. The windows were closed. And understand, this is the summer in Philadelphia. You ever been in Philadelphia during the summer? It's not pleasant. It's muggy.
Well, they had air conditioning, didn't they?
Yeah, no. So windows are closed, doors are closed, no AC, no deodorant, and they're wearing wool clothing. What could go? No wonder they were angry. But just be aware that they feared that people would not understand, and that those who would ultimately become anti-federalists would then put out there things that might not totally be true out of the misunderstanding. Suddenly you've got protests. Suddenly you got problems. We're going to make the sausage. We're not going to let anybody know we're doing it. Then we'll come out with the sausage. Here's what we got. Now let's debate it. Let us get it done first.
Okay, he says that a motion to reconsider a matter which had been determined by a majority may be made with leave unanimously given on the same day on which the vote passed, but otherwise not without 1 day's previous notice, in which last case, if the House agree to reconsideration, some future day shall be assigned for the purpose. Meaning, if you take a vote, it can be revoted on. If it's on the same day, if it's unanimous, otherwise we have to reconsider it another time.
We can change our mind.
Mr. C. Pinckney moved that a committee be appointed to superintend the minutes. Basically, someone to make sure everything Madison's putting down is accurate. Mr. Governor Morris objected to it. The entry of the proceedings of the convention belonged to the secretary as their impartial officer. A committee might have an interest and bias in molding the entry according to their opinions and wishes. This motion was negatived, 5 noes, 4 ayes.
Now, let's stop for a second. Now, Governor Morris is not Robert Morris. This is a different individual. And Governor Morris is the one who led the committee on the preamble later. Understand the preamble was written after the fact, not before the fact. This guy took this very seriously, and he was afraid that there would be negative influence on what they were trying to do as a body. He didn't want there to be shenanigans going on. And that's why Governor Morris was all about objecting it, and he won his objection.
So we have Pinckney from South Carolina wanted the superintending of the minutes. Morris objected to it, and Morris's objection carried the day. Okay, next we get Mr. Edmund Randolph. This is important. He is from Virginia, and he is going to, I think we should hold
and
off.
also remember, Randolph, this is Thomas Jefferson's cousin. While Thomas Jefferson is not there, Randolph is. And Randolph, though, and I just want to color this a little bit so people understand, he ultimately becomes kind of has a problem with a lot of what's in here. It gets interesting, but just to be aware, though, he is Jefferson's cousin. So while Jefferson is not there, his cousin is. Go ahead.
Well, it's what Randolph's going to do, because it was Virginia that called for the convention. Virginia is going to present its plan there. Mm-hmm. That's a good place for us to cut off for today before we jump into the Virginia
and then
plan.
we're talking the Virginia plan that Madison wrote. Remember, I told you that he presented it, said, "Hey, Virginia, I want us to present it as a whole." And Randolph was the one who presented it. And now, remember, Randolph, like Madison at that time, believed that the bigger states should have a lot more say. He was happy to present it. That's how I'll end my part of it.
No, very good. So that's a pretty good introduction of why they met and how they're going to meet. Mm-hmm. And we're going to go a lot deeper into this. As you can see from the Avalon Project Notes. This is going to take a number of weeks, a number of episodes. So bear with us. We'll go through it as quickly.
And be aware, my good friends, that I am not home right now. It'll be a week and a half before I'm there. And my schedule between, I just so happen to have a day today because we kind of scooted into Canton a day earlier than I had planned because there's a storm coming and I didn't want to get caught into that storm that's been pretty nasty further south. So I wanted to kind of beat the storm. So we have kind of an extra day here. And this is kind of a rest and relaxation day. That's the reason I was able to do the video. But I may not have another day like that until we get back in about a week and a half. So just wanted to give you guys that heads up. As for a KMET, which I've been pre-recording the last 3 shows on Friday nights before in my hotel room, I am going to have a real small window on Saturday to do the show live. So I will be live on KMET this Saturday. I'm sure my co-host Alan and Dennis will be thrilled. And heck, we might even have a war hamster sighting. I don't know, maybe.
It's always possible.
It's always possible.
Well, Doug, you want to tell everyone where they can find you?
DouglasVGibbs.com, DouglasVGibbs.com, and DouglasVGibbs.com. Now, real quick, let me say this real quick. So this trip is a combination of vacation and getting me out there. I have a new book called God and the Constitution, and I am promoting it. I have a couple of events along the way. Also got a chance to meet with some old students, one of them in North Carolina, Bill, and tell you what, you never saw someone happier to see me. I tell you, that was great. But anyway, but once we get back in June, because this has also been, how should I put this, a 31-day business meeting between my wife and I. She's going to take over a lot of my administrative. So we're going to see a lot of changes, hopefully, within the next month or two on what I'm doing. So keep coming to DouglasVGibbs.com. And I really do have to, now that I moved in, a lot of the hard work of being moved in is kind of over, start doing things daily. So we're going to start seeing blogs daily, stuff like that. That's the plan. So visit DouglasVGibbs.com. That said, I'm seriously considering pulling back on certain things that I do, like radio shows. But if you like them, if you want to keep it in place, we've got to fund them. I've got 2 advertisers. We fund about half of what it takes to keep those radio shows on the air. The rest of it's coming out of yours truly's pocket. You want to help keep those shows on the air? DouglasVGibbs.com, scroll down to the bottom of that main page, hit the donate link, or better yet, on the link, the link line of links there at the top, on the far right, it says join, all caps, star right next to it. Become a $9 a month patron. That $9 a month goes a long way if enough of you do it. And also, of course, buy my books. The latest being God in the Constitution. It's all you now. Very
good, Doug. And of course, everyone knows you're probably watching this on my Rumble channel, which is just War Hamster. And you can find me on Twitter /X at war_hamster1776. Until next week, cheers, everyone.